I was gonna open with "Hey," but then in the speaker room just now, at least for the mornings, I heard that there's a much better thing, which is "Good morning," good morning, which is what kind of funny because I just told the whole room you're morons. So that's kind of. And then the other thing is like I don't know. I was gonna come here and I was gonna make you kind of like assemble your own session, just as some kind of payback. Anyway, sorry for the stereotype jokes. I'm actually really happy to be here. Thank you so much. It's my first Swetugg or Swetugg. I still don't know really how to pronounce it, but I'm really happy to be here and on stage talking about SignalR and Blazor and .NET MAUI, basically all the best things in the world of .NET, right? So I kind of like have a love-hate relation. Oh, you want it back for a picture? Oh, great. Kind of like a love-hate relationship with these kinds of slides, but I don't want to assume that everyone knows me. So my name is Gerald. I came here from the Netherlands, and I work for Microsoft actually on the .NET MAUI team, so that's the thing that I love talking about. I have a little YouTube channel going on where I also talk a lot about the things that I'm going to show you today, so if you can't get enough, please like, subscribe, do all the things that the YouTubers want you to do, basically. That would be really amazing. But today, we're going to talk about real-time, ASP.NET. So this is going to be the first thing. We're going to see a couple of things today, but kind of like the red line throughout the whole thing is going to be about SignalR. So that's going to be really amazing, and it's incredibly simple real-time web for ASP.NET. At least that's kind of how it started, but it's not just web anymore, as we will see in this session. So what is the type of things that you can then actually do with SignalR, right? And well, you could probably think of these, like co-authoring stuff with like Word, collaborative, I don't know, Google Docs. That's the other thing, right, from our big competitor, where you can do like work together in the same document, and you see the little cursor with the initials of the other person hopping around and watching you. So that's stuff that you can do, or maybe who's still using, what's it called actually? Like you could code together. It's still in VS Code. Live share, thank you. You know it better than I do. So live share, where you could join sessions together, which is also really cool. Real-time location-based is also, of course, a really cool thing. And now if you use this together with like .NET MAUI, then you can access the sensors on your device to actually get the location and send that back to wherever you want, basically. And you can do that in real time with SignalR. In-app notifications, I'll get back to that actually as a last one. I should swap these around. So, and a live dashboard, right, updating all the things. So maybe you can do it all together, right, if you have the real-time location things of I don't know, you are starting the next Uber and all these cars are driving around and you have the live dashboard where you see all the cars drive. Actually, I was on Google Maps, again, competitor. I'm not sure what's going wrong here, but I was going on Google Maps to get to the venue and from the airport to here. And I think the buses and stuff updates real-time-ish on the map, which was really cool. So, I'm not sure if they use SignalR, but they could use SignalR for that. In-app notifications, that always needs a little bit of explanation because a lot of people are asking me then in the context of mobile apps, can I use this for push notifications? And as always, the answer is kind of like, it depends, right? But if you think of like the traditional kind of push notifications where you get a notification whenever the app is not running, then you cannot use SignalR for that. If you're getting into like the mobile app development space, then you will quickly learn that they very much, and they being Google and Apple and Windows to some extent, really like to control their ecosystem with good reason, right? You don't want the push notification system to get hacked and get all kinds of spam through that as well. So they have really separate environments, and you have to go through their servers to actually send a push notification to a user's device. So this SignalR connection will only work whenever the app is like open and running in the foreground, right? So whenever you know that your user is going to be looking at the app, then yes, you can send them a push notification, if you will. But if you are, talking about the push notifications that show up on your lock screen and integrated in the OS and that kind of stuff, that's not something that you can do with SignalR. So that's always a thing that I kind of like to clarify with this. So then, from a more technical standpoint, what is SignalR? Well, basically, it's a wrapper around a couple of standardized web technologies, like WebSockets and long polling, and a couple of other technologies that has been out there for a while now. And it's available actually for JavaScript, C#, F#, Visual Basic, even Java, right? So you can do it from all platforms because it's a open source and open protocol thing. So it's this is basically another standard on top of other standards, if you will. And now you can basically write your own implementation. So if it's not available, you can look up the specs and you can go out and make your own implementation. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is any other languages that this is available for as well. It's kind of cool. Like SignalR kind of decides itself like what it's going to use for actually the technology that is available. So it starts with the best one available, WebSockets, which is the most powerful thing, and then whenever that's not available in the client that you're using, in this case a browser, I think for like if you're talking about the Blazor and the .NET MAUIs, then WebSockets is probably always going to be available. But if you're using a browser, if you're still using on Internet Explorer, then it might fall back to something older, and it will still work, right? So it's implemented in a way that you don't have to care about what the underlying technology is that's being used. It will just work, and that's my favorite thing in the world, if it just works. So what does that look like from a little bit of pseudocode, basically? Because what this actually enables you to do is basically do remote procedure calls, right? You're invoking a piece of functionality on the server or the client. That's actually how it works. So it works based on hubs. We'll all see this in a little demo in a little bit. So you're going to create a hub on kind of like the server side. And then inside of your clients, you can have a list of clients because they have to explicitly connect to that server. And then you can reach all clients. You can reach one client. You can group them together. You can let them authenticate and reach a certain user if that's what you want. So you can do all these things. But you can just do clients.client and then with a specific ID, or you can just say clients.all, and you will send something to all the clients. And then you can say my client function. And that's something that then is hooked up on the client side, with this hub proxy. And then whenever that my client function is called, it's going to execute the code that kind of like belongs to that, right? And then whenever, I don't know, that triggers something, a favorite demo that I'm also going to use is, of course, the chat app. So whenever that happens, maybe something gets sent to the server, like, hey, a user, a client sent a message. The server then receives that and broadcasts that message to all the other people in a group or all the clients, depending on how you set up your chat app, right? So that would be the other way then, like you can say from your client, like, hey, you have a connection to the hub, to the server. You can say hub connection.send async. Unfortunately, you're going to have to use the kind of like magic strings here because there's not a really strong type definition of what's going on here. Also because you can use this through JavaScript and all kinds of other languages. So you're going to have that string of like, hey, this is the function that I want to invoke. And you can, of course, specify parameters with that as well, because, a chat app without specifying what message to send is going to be a very boring chat app, I guess. You also have, as with anything, a Azure thing for this. This is not something that I'm going to talk about in this session, but that basically makes it a little bit easier to host all these things, scale all these things, because as everything with Azure, it just makes your life easier, but it just costs a little bit more, mostly, right? So you can do all kinds of cool things with that. I just wanted you to know that this is definitely an option as well, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So to do this, I have a little interactive demo, which is always very cool and exciting, especially for me to see if it works. So get out your phones, you're allowed this time, and go to gerald.fyi/vote, and you should see a little application. Excuse me. You see a very simple application with 2 buttons. I'm not sure, maybe I should have started the application already on my side, because I'm not sure if the vote is actually going through right now. So if I go to the same thing, gerald.fyi/vote, there we are. And I have this, please don't go to this address because I have this very secret thing is admin is 42. See, and now you get to the admin console. So, all right, the first votes are coming in. Oh, you think this session is awesome. All right, okay, thank you. Oh, and it just keeps growing. It goes off the grid. Oh, thank you so much. This never happened. This is not true. There's a cheat mode in there, and whatever option you press, it's gonna always go to awesome. Got you there. But if you can, and I didn't really put effort into the security, right? So you can reload and you can vote again, and it will still go to awesome. So it's only beneficial to me actually. But if you keep it like on the, I do disable the buttons, right? So if you now look at your screen, you vote once, and then it says like voting is disabled, right? So if you leave it at that, stare at your phone, and if I press the reset button, now everything should be reset, and you can vote again, right? And now people are voting meh. Oh, now the cheat mode also got disabled, so now you can actually really let me know what this is. This is going the wrong way, so I'm gonna move on. But this is one thing that you can, you can see the real-time data coming in. You can see that whatever I'm doing here is influencing you right now. So that is the pretty amazing stuff that you can all do with this. Stop voting meh. Come on. I know who you are. I'm logging all of this. I will find you. So let's see how this works. So this is just an ASP.NET. This is all built, like SignalR originally was built on top of ASP.NET technology, right? So this is the thing that I want to show you right now. This is just a ASP.NET project. I think it's now all built in. So it's probably still under the hood a separate NuGet package, but it gets brought in with just your plain ASP.NET project. And whenever you start it, it looks like this. If you've been working with that before, it shouldn't be too mind-blowing. And we got all these things here, right? So the first thing is the program CS, so that's kind of like our starting point for the application, right? And what I did for this application is have the UI and our SignalR hub like in the same application, right? Typically, you probably don't want to do that, but for this case, it works because it's sample code. So I have this little vote state. I'll get to that in a little bit. Why that was interesting, also why I needed to have that as a singleton. I guess you can kind of guess why that is, but we'll see in a little bit. And then you want to do the add SignalR, right? So this call is now basically just there. This hooks everything up to enable your ASP.NET application for SignalR as well. So we have that, and what you want to do then is then register an endpoint for this voting hub, right? So we're creating this object right here, which is a voting hub. Apparently, we'll see that, and that can be reached through this voting hub. So if I actually go here. So if I actually go to this thing again, and it's not going to show me anything useful because I don't know the protocol or how to interact with it, but if I go to this website again, oops, not this one. Was it quick enough? Yes. And I go to, what was it? /voting hub. You see the connection ID is required, but you can at least see that something is happening here, right? So this hub is running, and if you send it the right stuff, then it will respond in a way that it can be understood. So that's running. We have this endpoint, and then we have this voting hub, right? So if we go in there, you can see that it inherits from a hub, which is a built-in thing from SignalR. So that's the thing that you need to inherit to make all this work. It has the basic functionality in there. We see our voting state again. Actually, let's go into there because that's kind of like how this works. So we have a very interesting Boolean cheat mode is true, and then we have a dictionary of votes, right? And it's a very simple thing. It's not the best code that you've ever seen in the world, probably. So we have this little thing with a category of 0 and a category of 1 and then the number of votes, right? So that's how this dictionary works. So we have 1 is awesome, 0 is awesome, 1 is meh, and then the number of votes that go with that. And it's a singleton because, you have like different requests coming in. So if I would do this in anything other than a singleton, then everyone would get their own vote state and all the votes would be scattered across objects, right? That everyone got that? So that's why we want to have a singleton. And we have that state in here, so we get that injected because I registered it in the dependency injection stuff, right? And here we have then a couple of things. So we have disable cheat mode, so that's one thing. It sets it to false. It resets the votes. And then it actually sends, this is already like a SignalR thing, right? It sends to all the clients. It sends that reset, so that makes, make your buttons enable again. And then it sets the update votes, right? So this is sent each time that the votes get a new count so that you can see I'm not sure actually why I'm sending this to the clients. There was probably a good reason, but I don't know. But this is, this should only be sent to the server maybe to actually show the new counts on the screen for me, right? So the send vote, that is something that can be invoked, so that we'll see that in a little bit on your client application. This is invoked on the server, and this will actually, register your vote. So it will set the option whenever the cheat mode is enabled. It will always be the awesome option, right? That's how that works. And then we do plus plus to increment the votes there. And then I'm going to send async again that update votes. So maybe the naming is wrong here. It does something useful for you. So that's how this works on the server side. Now you see this little to do here. What you might want to do is somehow identify the users that have already voted, and not simply refreshing the page resets the thing and you can vote again. So you might want to have some kind of mechanism to identify the actual users and see if they actually voted already, yes or no. But maybe a little bit too complicated for this demo. Nice homework for you. Go out, do it, do a pull request, and I'll see. I'll mention you in my next session. So this is the server side, but then kind of like the client side, right? So I have these pages, I have this index, and then whenever there's this very magic admin42, it's going to set this admin boolean, and then it's going to show that chart, right? I just took some kind of JavaScript plugin for my chart, and I don't know, it looks fancy, so it's fine. I have that reset button, and this is kind of like the important bit for you, right? This is the thing that you are seeing. So how do you like Gerald today? Vote below, and then you have awesome and meh, right? And then the same thing for like these JavaScript things. So you can just download with npm together with half of the other internet, install a SignalR package on your ASP.NET or any other web project. I mean, it's just JavaScript. You can use it with anything. And then you can use all this power with SignalR. Now, so that is this comment piece right here. Then for the non-admin people, you will get the client JavaScript. For me, I get the server, and then I set up that chart that you saw. So all the magic is happening in these JavaScript things. Let's start with the server one. So that's my side. So we're going to set up that connection, right? And this is going to be interesting because, of course, this is JavaScript, but this is going to be very similar for the other clients that we're going to see as well. So you get that SignalR, you do the hub connection builder, you say with URL, there is a ton of other options that you can configure as well. Then you say build, and boom, you have your connection basically ready to go. Provided that you have checked all the right things, you set the right address and that kind of stuff. Then you can register all your events or your remote procedure calls or whatever you want to call it. So we now have that connection, and we can say connection on. So this is whenever we receive something that update votes, we're going to, what are we going to do? Oh, do you actually see the chart as well on the client thing? I can't remember. Do you? No, right? I'm not sure why I'm doing this then. Oh, this is the server. So I'm going to set the, sorry, a little bit confused here. This is going to update that chart that we just saw, right? So I don't know, this is a pre-built thing. So this just takes in a data set, and it takes in that dictionary actually. It's serialized as JSON, and it understands that automatically. And I update it so that it, updates the bars. And then we have this other thing, which is actually going to send something. And in this case, it's kind of confusing because the server is also the SignalR server, right? So it's going to send it to itself. That's probably also why I have this update votes, right? Because the server is also the client. That's what gets me here. So we have this reset button, and here we're going to say connection.invoke. So here we're actually going to send something, right? And we're going to disable that cheat mode. So what you can see here is that this disabled cheat mode has to match whatever is here, right? So this is this one. So it's going to actually invoke this thing. And here, for the update vote, it's going to be the other way around. Like this update votes has to be the same thing as here. We're going to send async. And we can send parameters, right? So we have this vote state vote. So I'm going to send that dictionary of the votes that are coming in. And you can see we can capture that by getting this parameter right here. So if I would like to extend this, I could do whatever here, and it would input that as a parameter, and I could use that provided that you do the right serialization, deserialization with JSON, right? So it all takes care of that with the serialization, deserialization, but you just have to use it the right way here in JavaScript as well. And then for the client stuff, it won't be much of a surprise. Like there's the same kind of stuff going on. We also have to build up that connection. So whenever you went to the site, the connection got built up, right? It connected to the server. And then with the awesome button, it's going to send a vote, again with a parameter of 0. So this is kind of like the other way around. We can invoke the send vote. So let's go back to our little hub here. And we have this send vote, and also with a parameter, right? So you have to make sure that that kind of matches here as well. So we could do send vote, comma 0, and that's going to be sent over to the server. Then I do some magic stuff with HTML here, no jQuery required. We don't want the stuff, just vanilla JavaScript. And the same thing for the reset and the map button and that kind of stuff. And actually here at the end, we say connection.start, right? So we wire up all the things, and then we say connection.start, and it all starts wiring up together and working. And I kind of assume for this demo that everything works, which it did, yay. Because else I'm just going to do console error, and no one's ever going to know, right? So that's how that kind of works together. All right, then our next step. I kind of assume that I can go through the rest of these slides pretty quickly and just move on to the next demo. Who does not really know what Blazor is? No one? See, so I can go over this very quickly. But just to make this a more storytelling experience, I'm going to tell you anyway. So Blazor, you know, it's jokingly always like web development without JavaScript, right? So if you think about these single-page applications, then you think about these things like rich applications, dialogues, grids, flyout menus, all this kind of stuff. And then whenever you go to the same thing, but now on a mobile device, it all scales, it all nice folds together. We get that hamburger menu, but still that same rich experience. But if we think about these single-page applications, then you automatically kind of think about Angular, Vue, React, and it's all based on JavaScript, right? Now, I can make jokes about JavaScript here, like for the rest of the session, but by that time, you know, there's going to be 50 more JavaScript frameworks coming out, so I'm not going to do that. But wouldn't it be cool if you could just not leave C#, not leave the ecosystem that you're used to, and write everything with C# and .NET? Now, I love to make jokes about JavaScript and that kind of stuff, but it could well be about TypeScript or Rust or any other language, right? It's just about switching context, which is not great for you to do, and that eats into your productivity. So it would be cool if you could just also write your single-page applications with C# and .NET and all the stuff that you already know. So that's why we came up, and I can say we because I work at Microsoft. I had nothing to do with it, but it sounds cool. So that's why we came up with Blazor. So now you can write your single-page applications with C#. You can use the tooling and the IDE that you know and love, so Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio for Mac, a consistent ecosystem, so you don't have to download everything from NPM. You can just download a quarter of the Internet of NuGet packages now, which is much better. And you know, we have a lot of stability. We have 20 years of .NET to build on. You just had the history of .NET just before this session. So there has been a lot going on and a lot of learnings that we have applied here. So where does Blazor kind of fit in with the rest of the ASP.NET Core family? Well, you can actually see here we have like the web UI part with MVC, Ranger pages. You just saw that in my other demo. Single page application, we already have that, but then based on Angular, I think, right now. And then on the other side, you can already see SignalR. So if you've been using Blazor, and you have, or at least you know what it is, and if you've been using Blazor Server specifically, then you've already used SignalR without maybe even knowing. So that's pretty cool. And then it won't be a surprise that in that empty block right there, Blazor will fit right in. So like I already mentioned, you have two flavors of Blazor. And one is the more traditional approach where you have Blazor Server, which still runs on a server. And then with a SignalR connection, it's going to send back and forth all the UI updates. And then we have Blazor WebAssembly, which is arguably even more cooler, where everything runs inside of your browser, just like your typical JavaScript application would like. So you're downloading the whole application. Now, I'm going to skip over this a little bit faster because you know all this, right? And I have less time already. So whenever you have choices, you also have like pros and cons, right? So for like the Blazor server, you're still connected to a server, so you need to have that persistent connection. You can't really have an offline application. There is some UI latency because every click is basically going back and forth to the server. And then for Blazor WebAssembly, right, you don't really know how fast your application. I'm just focusing on the cons basically at the end. You have no performance. You don't know what the performance is going to be. It might just as well run on a thin client for all you know. And you have a slightly larger initial download size, right? Because you're downloading the .NET runtime as well. I think of .NET 6, that is like 1 megabyte. So it's smaller than your average cat GIF. GIF. I don't know what it is still. Maybe in Sweden it's GIF. I don't know how that works. So a lot is going on there, but it's all choices that you have to make depending on your scenario. So now we have Blazor Server, WebAssembly, and Hybrid. So you can also run your Blazor applications inside of .NET MAUI, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So if I switch over to another demo, which is going to be our amazing chat app that I've already teased here a little bit. So let me close this cheating voting poll. This is not interactive, so that I don't get any embarrassing messages from you on the screen here. So I have here set up a solution with a couple of things, and I'm going to go over them if time allows me to do all of them. But one of which is like this little demo hub again, right? So we have our SignalR demo hub here, and again we have this program CS. It's a slightly different ASP.NET project because I trimmed down some things, and we don't need all the Razor stuff to show an actual UI, right? This is just going to run on the background, and you still again see the add SignalR. By the way, if you're going to use the Azure SignalR thing, I think it's just as easy as, I think you do need to install the separate NuGet package, and it will just become like add SignalR Azure or Azure SignalR. It's just the easy kind of like same thing. I had to do a thing with cores, right? If you're going to do stuff across like different web things and domains and whatnot, then you're going to run into these things. So I'm just going to allow everything because it's demo code. I can get away with it. And then I can say use endpoints. I'm not sure why I get squigglies here. It has a suggestion for me, but I'm not going to go there right now. And you can see, again, that same pattern, right? So we have use endpoints. This kind of registers the endpoints that you can reach for your ASP.NET application. I'm going to map that hub again, this time a chat hub, and I'm going to register that on this endpoint. And if we go to our chat hub, it's very, very simple. You could already see it. Again, it inherits from hub, right? That's the important thing here. And then you can do send message, and you get it from a user and an actual message. And then I'm just going to do clients.all.sendAsync, and it's going to be receive message. That is the signal that I'm then going to send to all the clients. So on the clients, then I have to have a method that is called receive message, right? So that's how this works. That's what we already learned. And here you can see if we explore the API a little bit more, like I said, the clients, you could also do, it's maybe a little bit small. You could see that you could do all except, right? So technically, I do not want to, if this also had a UI, if I'm using Teams, Microsoft Teams, it would be weird to kind of like send this signal also to myself, right? I would maybe even have the risk of sending that chat message and seeing that again in my same window. So I could use all except, right? So I can send all the clients except myself. That would be a use case, I guess. You could get like the caller. You can get all these kinds of things. You can create groups, like I already mentioned. So you can do a bunch of things with how to send something to other people. So we got that, and you can already see like this is now this is technically what we saw on the server as well, but the code is all very similar, right, between JavaScript and C#. And if you know how to do it in one end, you probably also know how to do it in the other. So this is our server. Let me just run that before I forget, and the demo will fail. So I'm just gonna run that. Debug without debugging. So that's just going to run in the background. You will see a little process coming up, and it says, hey, it's listening to this endpoint, and that's it, right? So we're not going to be bothered with that again. Then I have a couple of other things. So I have this Blazor client right here. That's the one that we're going to focus on. Then I have a MAUI Blazor client and a MAUI, just a MAUI client, right? So we'll get to what that is exactly. And then I have this reusable chat components. Now, you all already know what Blazor is, so I'm going to assume that you also know what Blazor components are. And Blazor components is basically a piece of Blazor, a piece of Razor that you put into your own in its own project, and then you can redistribute that project, or you can put it in a NuGet if you want, and then redistribute it to all the people in the world, right? So that's how that works. So I created this little my chat component, which gets like injected, so dependency injection, the navigation manager, which is a built-in thing for Blazor. Then it's using this SignalR client, right? So I got that here. And then here you can see the mix with HTML, right? So I have this Blazor SignalR chat. So basically my Blazor application is just this one component. I rolled everything inside of this component. And you can see it has a couple of inputs. So you can input your name, you can input your message, and then you have this button with onClick. It's going to send async with the username and message. So I expect here to find a method that does the send async with the username and the message, and that's going to use that hub connection, send async, send message with the username and message. And that send message is the same one that we saw here with this chat hub, right? So that's how that all fits together. Now here, again, like I said, this is not JavaScript anymore. This is now C#. So now here we have the same hub connection, and we can see that hub connection builder with URL this time. And then we can say, you know, endpoint build, and this is kind of like the exact same thing that we saw in the JavaScript earlier, right? So this makes it all very familiar, and that's a pattern that you will see across, I think, the different .NET projects now more and more, also with .NET MAUI. And then we register again with like on, but here we can strongly type it because, you know, we're not animals, we're not using JavaScript anymore. We can now say on string, and you can send like, hey, I'm going to actually get this thing right here. So we're going to receive message. That's the signal that we register. If we get from the server here, and then we have this delegate that we're actually going to send it to. So we have this message received. And here you can see that string. See, it's strongly typed, so we can have username message. And I do messages.add, just a simple thing. And the state has changed is just to let Blazor know that something happened and we need to update the UI. So we have that all in place, and then we're again going to say hub connection.start. And if you look at that hub connection, you can do a couple of other things here as well. So not just with the clients, but with the connection too. We have events for like, hey, the connection got closed. We can get the connection ID. You can set a whole bunch of other things, reconnected, reconnecting. So like I said, if you've been using Blazor server, then you might have, already have used this because you might have, you know, let your computer, left your computer to get coffee. You came back and then you had the Blazor side going like, ooh, reconnecting, right? That's hooking into these events using SignalR to kind of like try to get the connection back to the web application. So that's what's going on here, but it's all built in there. So you get the state, you can do a whole bunch of things, stop the connection. So that's all there for you to use. So if we have that, and I can just run this, let me set it as the startup thing here. So Blazor client, and I can now run this. And it's going to be, you know, kind of boring because what you're going to see is me chatting to myself. I'm just going to see, I can type in a message, and I can see that message, and it will pop up here in my thing. Yes, sync my profile, it's fine. Loading. Please load. There we are. So here we have the name, Gerald, hey, good moron, something like that. And you can see Gerald said, hey, right? I realize now I skipped one thing in my Blazor component because here I have also a little thing where it goes through the for each with all the messages and it prints out the messages in a list, right? So it shows me all the messages here. So that's what's going on in this browser. So I got that, SignalR chat, which is fine. Very cool. So that works. That's cool. Now let's move on to the next one. So let's do a little explanation, quick explanation, because I'm already going way over time. What is .NET MAUI? So .NET MAUI, did you already visit the wonderful, amazing session of Maddie? Because I saw her just walk in, so I have to. Yes? Okay. Great. And there's going to be a session, I think, right after this or after that by David also, who's going to talk about how to make your .NET MAUI apps beautiful, which is something I don't know anything about, as you'll see in a minute. There's great sessions on .NET MAUI as well. I think Carl Franklin also did something amazing. So what is .NET MAUI? The evolution of Xamarin Forms. Xamarin Forms has been our offering for creating cross-platform apps based on C#.NET for iOS, Android, and UWP. Now, we kind of had this problem with Xamarin Forms. It was already kind of like the name Xamarin Forms, right? Kind of boring. And then there was this graphic. I'm not sure if this is whenever Xamarin was acquired by Microsoft or it was before that. But even if you don't look at like all the bullet points that are there, Xamarin Forms is best for, and it's like, ooh, boxes, ooh, yahoo. That's all we can do, apparently. And if you want to have the real power, you have to go one level deeper to Xamarin iOS, where you can do media players and games and maps. So, you know, we always kind of like stuck with that image. And also there's some rumors and wild stories. Find me after this session and we can chat about it. That you know, Xamarin Forms was maybe only built and architected to kind of like do data entry applications and do forms like applications, right? But people could do more with Xamarin Forms, and definitely they did, but they would run into, you know, the architecture that was not prepared for that. So you would run into like performance issues when you were actually creating all these kinds of rich applications with games and media players and whatnot. So now we had the unique opportunity, luckily, to turn it into .NET MAUI and really become a first-class citizen of the .NET ecosystem, which is really cool. And it stands for Multi-Platform App UI. So the P we kind of like conveniently made lowercase because, you know, .NET MAUI, it kind of sounds cool, it adds more power, but it's just a little bit different. And now that's our cross-platform offering for Android, Windows, macOS, iOS. So kind of like the same, but a little bit different. It's not called UWP anymore. We're using WinUI, but we're calling it just Windows now to make sure that we do not tie ourselves to a specific technology. If you put a little marketing sauce over that, .NET MAUI is the most productive way to develop native apps that perform great across all these platforms from a single code base. Now, if you put it like really simple, what this does, what .NET MAUI does, is basically translate the native control. So well, actually the other way around. So you have on iOS and Android, you have this progress bar, which is also funny because it's a circle. I don't know. It's a progress bar and a UI activity indicator, right? So these kind of like do the same thing for two platforms, but they look very different. They have very different APIs. And what we're doing with .NET MAUI is we provide an abstract API so that you can just call it activity indicator. And depending on if you're running on iOS or Windows or Android or Tizen, it will look and feel the way it should on that platform, right? So same thing with a slider or a seek bar. We just call it a slider, and depending on the platform that you're running on, it's going to show up one way or the other. So the way that we make that happen is basically leverage everything in the .NET ecosystem, and depending on the stack that you're looking at, you know, we just saw ASP.NET. We're going to sprinkle some ASP specific libraries on top of that. We did the same thing for iOS and Android and all the platforms that we're supporting. We just made wrappers and libraries that can interact with the APIs on those platforms. So now we suddenly have APIs for like MapKit, UIKit, all the APIs that are available on iOS. Same thing for Android. If you start running on Android, we have sprinkled over the libraries that you can use on Android, and you can now do it all with C# and .NET. Also, I think someone mentioned this. I'm not sure what session. Oh, it was maybe with the podcast, the live podcast recording for .NET Rocks. We also have something that's historically known as Xamarin Essentials. So the Essentials name is kind of like going away, and it's just gone up into .NET MAUI. And we have all these APIs that are similar across platforms to do your compass, your flashlight was one of the favorites, right? The battery information, get your geolocation, access your camera, do all these things. And we just called that Essentials, and now you can find it under Microsoft.MAUI.devices. And it's just sensors, just APIs that you can use, which makes it really powerful, right? You can just use C# and .NET to leverage all this power that is native on your device, basically. So let's quickly run into that. And if you look at a typical .NET MAUI project, it's pretty cool. And then again, that comes back to my point of like we're trying to unify or at least make familiar like all the bits in .NET projects, right? Because if we switch over to, if I close all these things, let's keep the chat hub open just for switching around. And this is my .NET MAUI project. And you can see here, so we have these platforms, and you can see Android, iOS, macOS, Tizen, Windows. So if you still want to write platform-specific code, but still in C# and .NET, you can definitely do it in here. So even if we didn't surface something into .NET MAUI yet, you can go in here, you can write some code, still in C# and .NET. You do have to familiarize yourself a little bit with how iOS or Android works, but you can service that functionality yourself if we didn't do it yet. But if we look at this MAUI program, for instance, you can see that same kind of like app builder, right? So if you're used to working with Blazor or ASP.NET, then you recognize this format, right? So that's one of the things that we try to do with .NET MAUI, to adopt this pattern as well, so that you immediately know, like, hey, I know how to do this. I can hook these things up. So that's kind of like your .NET MAUI application. There's a ton of stuff that I'd love to talk about, but that's not what this session is about. So we're going back to the SignalR thing, and we have this main page. So here we have this .NET MAUI layer. So we have this scroll view. We have a vertical stack layout, so we're going to stack a bunch of things on top of each other. We have this label for a user, an entry for the username. So this, this is the same thing as for your Blazor thing. A button to send it, and a collection view. So that's our thing, our control control for a list where you can add your things to, which is very big whenever you're using mobile applications. You're going to show that data. So we have this collection view, and in this case, it's just going to simply show a label of the messages that are going to be sent and received, right? So that's the thing. If we then go to our code behind for this, it's going to be a little bit boring. Because we have this list of messages that's going on, and we see that same hub connection. So what you only need to do is just install the NuGet package that is probably along these lines, Microsoft ASP.NET Core SignalR client, install the NuGet package on your .NET MAUI application, and you suddenly have all these objects exactly the same as the other projects that you can use here now in your .NET MAUI application. So I'm going to use that IP. Again, if you're going to use like this is a quick pro tip right here. If you're going to get into cross-platform development, you're going to use emulators a lot. And I'm going to use the Android emulator. And the Android emulator is not talking to localhost. If you talk to localhost on your Android emulator, you're talking to the localhost inside of your little Android thingy. And that's not where the SignalR server is running, right? So that's something that confuses people who are starting out with this. So that's why I'm using the IP address, because act like the emulator is a separate device in your hand, and it needs to connect to my laptop right here, right? So you really need to connect to that IP address. But then I can just say again, hub connection builder with URL, go to this fancy URL, .build. I'm just going to wire up this same thing right here. So if I was a good developer, I would have just reused the code that we've just saw and do it more neat and do clean architecture and solid and all those kinds of terms. But this is demo code. And you can see that this is exactly the same, right? And I do need some specific stuff for how to handle this with the UI, right? .NET MAUI has its own UI stuff. So I'm going to add this to the messages, and by the power, the magic of data binding and XAML and that kind of stuff, it's going to automatically show up in my collection view that we've just seen. And here you can see like these things, these events are the things that match the chat hub, right? So if I switch over to my MAUI client and select the right emulator, I think this has been pretty well, actually. It can take a long time, especially the first time to deploy your application to the Android device or the Android emulator, but it's been much, much faster for me lately. So I don't know what happened there, but it's working. Okay, so we see a UI, and it's kind of like, this is how a UI should look like on Android, apparently. I'm an iOS user, but we have this little underline, a label that looks like this. And I can here say Gerald, and I didn't model my UI correctly here because things are overlapping, which is not great, but here we are. Hey, and whenever I click send, it's going to say Gerald says here, hey, right? So this works as well. Now, I'm just going to stop running this again. But if I bring it up again, and we're going to add the next thing, then we can see that things are going to start to talk to each other. And if I bring up like my Blazor client again, let's just run this also. Where's that option? Debug. Without debugging. See, I'm going to get this one, and I have these both. I can see Gerald Blazor. Let's do that. Hey, send, and we can see it here as well, right? And if I said Gerald MAUI, and I can say good moron, I don't know how you spell it, and you send it, you can see that it automatically shows up there as well, right? Yeah, normally I get applause here, but it's no worries, no worries. So that's how that all works together, right? So that's really cool. Now for the last part, and I really have to go through this a little bit quickly. So we also have now a solution which kind of like brings these two worlds together, right? So we also have Blazor Hybrid. There was a good session, I think, about Carl Franklin. I sadly missed this because he apparently was showing a plugin that I made. But we have this thing, right? Oh, we need to watch this because this took way too much time to make this animation. So we have this thing, right? We have Blazor on the one side for all the web stuff, and now we have .NET MAUI, which enables us to leverage all the power of the actual devices and the actual platforms. So how cool would it be if we could, get that stuff together? And we have Blazor Hybrid. And because Blazor is already a .NET application, and we have already the .NET runtime running on all these platforms through .NET MAUI, you can now natively run that Blazor application on your devices. So one of the things that will happen here is you can reuse everything. You can build those cross-platform native apps that run on Windows, macOS, iOS, Android, which is not coincidentally all the platforms that are supported by .NET MAUI. You can use your existing Razor class library. So that Razor component that I've just showed you, you can just take that, put it in your .NET MAUI app, and boom, my application is 80% done, right? So that's really amazing. So if you have like existing Blazor applications, or you want to have both a web application and a .NET MAUI application, this is a very good way to go forward. And you have full platform device access. I'll get to that in a little bit. So what is it exactly? It is the extension of Blazor. It's kind of like the third option that I've just showed you. Server, WebAssembly, we now have hybrid as well. Built on .NET 6 and now .NET 7, of course, and .NET MAUI. And it's implemented through a Blazor web view control, which is really cool. So you can choose if you want to make your whole application a big web view and basically build your whole Blazor application inside of that. Or you can kind of go mix and matching. You can say, hey, my whole layout is a native .NET MAUI application, but I have this one thing that I want to make Blazor, and you can do that. You can just use one Blazor component with that tiny web view in there. And what is even cooler is that the web view is also implemented for WPF and WinForms. So you can also use your Blazor stuff inside of WPF and WinForms. Still no applause? All right. No. So a little bit of Mythbusters. This is what I wanted to go to. So like I said, Blazor is already a .NET application. So there's no server process secretly spun up, and it's not mimicking or emulating any kind of web application. It really is a .NET application running on the .NET runtime. There is no HTTP request. So if you want to build a offline application, you totally can. And there's no browser sandbox, right? So in your Blazor application on the web, you are bound to the browser's rules, right? You're bound to that sandbox. You can't go formatting your hard drive, luckily, because if you would go to the wrong website and your drive would be formatted, that wouldn't be great. The good news is with .NET MAUI or Blazor Hybrid, you can format your hard drive. So that's kind of like the difference, right? But you're not bound to that sandbox. So the only thing that's kind of like HTML and web about this is how your UI looks like. So that can help you with the responsiveness because Bootstrap is built in and all that kind of stuff. So if we now take this next thing and we go to our MAUI, I don't know how do they call it, demo MAUI Blazor client, and I have that one. So let's just have a real quick look at how this looks. So basically, we took the Blazor template from ASP.NET, we took the .NET MAUI template, and we pushed them together, and that's now we have Blazor Hybrid. So you can still see that platforms folder, right? So you can do all the metadata and all the platform-specific stuff. But you also see the pages, so like the Razor pages and all these types of things. Now, we still see that MAUI program, so we can do all these things here. You can see also this little sidestep. It's not about SignalR, but what's really cool is that we, again, adopted all the dependency injection stuff, patterns from ASP.NET as well. So you can just do that add singleton for the weather service, and then you can inject that through the constructor injection because that's built in, or you can just say, do it the Razor way, and you can say, hey, inject this weather forecast errors. That all works together. It doesn't matter which way you kind of like choose. It all works together. So that's pretty amazing. Now, if I run this on another emulator, just for the nice effect here, so I'm running this on a separate emulator. I have 2 Android emulators here. That's why my machine is very hot and it's blowing here. I hope you can't hear that. So we have all these applications. My chat hub thing is still running here in the background. My Blazor web application is still running here. And now I'm gonna have trouble to put this all into one thing. But I can see, hey, Gerald, hey, send. And you can see it here on this Blazor MAUI Blazor Hybrid. I'm getting confused with all the terms here. It's just too much. But you can see that it comes across all these platforms, right? So you can see it on the web. This is the Blazor application running inside of my .NET MAUI app, and you can see it here with the native MAUI app running as well. And if we inspect a little bit more about how this .NET MAUI Blazor application is built up, you can see that we just have this one page. It says my chat component, which is the thing that we just walked through. I just plugged that in here, and it worked. Right? So no fancy stuff. I can just reuse my code here, and you can do it across all these things. So that is really, really amazing. All right, so actually, I went a little bit fast, but with good reason. I think it's about lunchtime. So, but before you all get up and leave, whew, that was close there. there's some other things that I want to. There's homework. So there's this great session for the .NET Conf focus on MAUI, which happened somewhere last year. I can't remember which. This is my two best friends in the entire world, James Montemagno, and the other one is you probably know him. You don't know him, maybe. Sean Lawrence, who is from the UK. And I just met him for the first time 2 weeks ago, before we've chatted years online only. But he's great with .NET MAUI and Xamarin, but he also has fun in creating games with Xamarin and .NET MAUI, which is really cool. And he showed off at .NET Conf a kind of like Pictionary game, also built with SignalR. So what you're seeing here, you should check out the video, is that on the left-hand side, you can see like, hey, this is kind of like the admin view. So you get on the top, you get the name, the word, you have to draw a house. And then on the right-hand side, that was James, he can see the drawing coming up in real time, and he has to guess what he's trying to draw, right? So it's kind of like a Pictionary. You had to draw something, I think, a couple of years ago, a whole bunch of years ago. Which kind of had the same thing. And they were, this was during like the pandemic, everything remote. So this session was done remotely. You can see he's at his home and he's at the studio, and they were demoing this in real time. So that's really cool. And I tried, this is a much less fancier video. My home was being renovated, so that's why you can see, like, I don't know, the weird background there. But I was on the couch, I was trying to hook this up. So here you can see, like, the Mac version, because it's a .NET MAUI app that Sean was creating. So this is the Mac version, the macOS version. And I tried to hook it up to Blazor, because that's something that Sean didn't do, right? So to also enable that web thing there. So you can see that same house thing, and I'm not going to draw a house, I'm just going to say hello. But you can see that this also now works in a Blazor web application. I don't know why I filmed this with my phone instead of just making a screen recording, but I did, right? So I just pulled this up. Actually, I remember doing this, and I thought it might be fun to add to the session. So a little bit more professional project is this one, the .NET podcast. We're using this internally for like a whole bunch of things, like testing out our own new features, using it for benchmarking, et cetera, but it's all open source. You can all deploy it to your own Azure subscription if you want. Don't forget to turn it off. Ask me how I know. But this is really cool. So this has like the Blazor web application that you can use. And then it has the mobile app built twice. Once in like native .NET MAUI, so everything native, and one with Blazor Hybrid. So that's the same mobile app and now everything Blazor, and that shares code with the web application. So that's really cool. And a whole bunch of things. This lists a bunch of podcasts, also .NET Rocks I see on there. And you can kind of like go listen together, and the synchronizing of the listening, and you can do emoji responses while you're listening to let people know what you think. That all goes through a SignalR connection, so that's really cool. Now we have a lot of choices with all these stuff, so we came up with this little graph, like when to choose what, a little bit of guidance. If you want to go for reach, then you want to go with Blazor, right? If you have like Tizen, which runs on your refrigerator, and that can run a browser, then you want to go with Blazor, right? Because then your application can even run on there. If you want to have a little bit in the middle, so maybe you have an existing Blazor application, you can go with the Blazor hybrid route, right? So it runs on both things, and you can reuse some of your code very easily. But if you really want to get on the power of a platform, use everything on there, have the best performance, then you probably want to look at things like MAUI, WinUI, the platforms that the frameworks that actually belong on those frameworks. Thanks so much for joining. I hope you will enjoy the rest of Swetugg, enjoy lunch. Please don't forget to fill out the little forms. Check the very happy smiley faces if you like the session. Thank you.